Good morning, everybody. This is a live emergency briefing as we've already had numerous tornado warnings already this morning across western Arkansas into far eastern Oklahoma. You've got this one that's approaching the Ozarks St. Francis National Forest. It's right over the National Forest right now. And a regional tornado outbreak is expected today. Big time wind as well. The Storm Prediction Center maintained the moderate risk. That includes the entire state of Mississippi, a large swath of Louisiana, Arkansas as well, into western Tennessee. We're going to break down the forecast models and what my plan of attack is for this storm chase. But first, I wanted to break down our tornado warning that is heading into the Ozarks St. Francis National Forest right now. There was another circulation that developed to the west of the Mena, Arkansas area. That was to the southwest of Fort Smith. Notice how this convective line is moving very rapidly, and it's a broken convective line. Basically, you're going to have this QLCS pattern that is going to be pushing off to the east through the target area. You also have storms that are developing down along the dry line further south into East Texas, and this is probably going to be the mode that I'm going to intercept across northern Louisiana. It looks like a majority of the models do ramp up the convection by about midday, by about 18Z. That's when the models really start to ramp that up. Tornado watches are already issued with high probabilities as well. Massive moderate risk that is in effect. Let me show you that moderate risk. This is the latest outlook, the morning outlook that extends the moderate risk all the way through the Memphis area. That happened yesterday. Large moderate risk is maintained. The entire state of Mississippi is included in the moderate risk. And it also goes all the way back into the central portion of Louisiana, basically Ruston, Louisiana off to the east. It includes the I-20 corridor, almost down to the I-10 corridor. New Orleans is included in that enhanced risk. But it looks like closer to sunset that intense supercell storms could make landfall off the northern Gulf of Mexico into the central Gulf Coast region. And that could result in a later mode of severe weather, very intense tornadoes expected down there as well. So I think that my plan is to head west on I-20. This is a tornado watch that's already in place. Moderate probabilities of tornadoes as well within this environment. Definitely going to be several strong tornadoes are expected today. Supercell storms, circulations embedded within the squall line. You don't want to get too hung up on whether it's a supercell tornado or a QLCS tornado. Both are capable of being deadly and potentially very, very dangerous today. So that's why we are breaking this down. We are activating full-blown chase mode today. I do want to show you the forecast, in-depth look at the forecast models as well. I don't have a ton of time today to do this, however, because I got to start heading west on Interstate 20, so I'm going to try to do a relatively fast model breakdown. Basically, the story today is the extreme wind shear that's in place. Normally, very generally, for tornadoes, you usually need about 200 meters squared per second squared or greater, 0 to 1 kilometer SRH. Today, we're going to be talking about greater than 500 0 to 1 kilometer SRH. So an abundance of wind shear is expected today ahead of the fast-moving squall line. Instability maybe not be as impressive, but more than compensated for with the abundance of wind shear that is expected across the target area today. The latest HRRR, the 12Z HRRR, does show it to be quite warm by afternoon. This is by 18Z, shows temperatures starting to push 80 across Mississippi. So it is going to be quite warm across the warm sector as well today. I wouldn't be surprised if that contributes to even some more substantial instability than is modeled. Definitely the greatest instability is the I-20 corridor down to the central Gulf Coast region. That's certainly the greatest surface-based instability. It's also possible that the winds could be more westerly a little bit further south as well. The mid and upper level winds in the troposphere could be more westerly, and that could lead to some more southwest to northeast oriented storm motions from the I-20 corridor and areas off to the south. Let me show you this low-level jet first. So that's the low-level jet that is just cranking northern Louisiana, central Louisiana, down into, we'll go a little bit further south. Definitely want to show you that low-level jet axis as it pushes east through Louisiana. Well, look at that yellow. That's basically 60 knots and greater, just ahead of the fast-moving squall line. I don't think that it looks like the shape of this trough doesn't necessarily favor the development of these multiple prefrontal confluence lines as you get with a rapidly ejecting, shearing out storm system, carving out a much larger warm sector. This looks like the low-level shear is relatively concentrated right along the advancing squall line, but certainly maximizes right into central Louisiana, up through the I-20 corridor, Lake Charles, up through central Louisiana, up into eastern Arkansas as well. And that is contributing to extreme wind shear. Looking at 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity, look at that in red. Basically, the red is 300 to 350 and greater. Any purples in there, 400, 0 to 1 kilometer shear and greater. And you certainly want to look for where the line is due more north-south to really have the greatest QLCS tornado potential. That looks like it happens from the Louisiana border up to Arkansas. But the dry line slash front is going to be moving a lot slower down across Arkansas. So that's going to give an opportunity for supercell storms to even move off that boundary, especially where the upper level winds are a little bit more westerly. But this is that channel, the low level jet that marches off to the east, 0 to 1 kilometer SRH, extreme expected. And that includes to the west of Jackson along the I-20 corridor in Louisiana. I could start to intercept these QLCS tornadoes first along the I-20 corridor relatively early in the afternoon, and then drop south closer to the Gulf Coast, and then work the I-10 corridor through late evening. Intense supercells coming in off the northern Gulf of Mexico, southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, eventually into the Florida Panhandle as well. This is at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. The boundary has pushed just to the east of the Mississippi River, down through Natchez as well. Tornadoes moving into this environment. Extreme wind shear as well, all the way up to the Memphis area. That's the story today, is this extreme wind shear that's going to be available to this squall line that's going to be marching off to the east. Looks like it maximizes central and northern Mississippi, at least the 0 to 1 kilometer shear near the I-55 corridor by about 5 p.m. But some pretty decent helicity coupled with some relatively strong surface-based instability, almost 1,000 cape, 470, 0 to 1 kilometer storm relative helicity. Pretty skinny cape, not much in the way of an elevated mix layer with this meridional flow. But I like to look at the shape of the mid and upper level winds as well when I'm targeting. And it does look like further south, you get more of these southwest to northeast oriented winds. Further north across northern Mississippi into western Tennessee, you have more meridional winds or due south to north, mid and upper level winds, roughly parallel to the very strong low level jet, but still very strong low level wind shear with this squall line marching off to the east, almost forces a more easterly storm motion within the individual convective elements. And that's why it seems like these squall lines are even more effective at spinning up tornadoes within them. And again, we've already had what appears to be some QLCS tornadoes so far this morning. But notice how it's a solid line across northern Mississippi and into western Tennessee. Pure QLCS action from the Memphis area through northern Mississippi. But then you get some cleaner inflow. Basically, the I-20 corridor down toward I-10, even the potential development of a prefrontal cluster, a confluence line of renegades that develops through eastern Louisiana into southern Mississippi. That's at 5 p.m. This is at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And it does look like these try to break up just a little bit more within this line. The QLCS regime advances rapidly through northern Mississippi up into western Tennessee. But anywhere south of this elbow, it does look like you get a little bit of some cleaner inflow available to these storms. Not as much stratiform precipitation that migrates out ahead of it. Usually, though, this can even help wrap up tornadoes. It helps to decouple the boundary layer even more, strengthen the low-level shear even more out ahead of that advancing convective line. This is at 6 p.m. Marches east of I-55. It does look like the HRRR wants to fire these renegades as well, even into western Alabama. That'll be in an extreme wind shear environment. If these are able to mature, they certainly will be capable of tornadoes, potentially strong tornadoes. But this line continues to march east, embedded supercell storms to this all the way down through eastern Louisiana into southern Mississippi. That's at 0Z. So we're getting closer to sunset here. This is at 8 p.m. And look at these through southern Mississippi. These start to get even a little bit more supercellular, starting to knock on the door of New Orleans as well, with a very strong low-level jet extending all the way down into southeastern Louisiana, down to Lake Pontchartrain, southeastern Mississippi. So a very strong wind shear environment as that squall line is marching off to the east. And I have seen a lot of posts as well about a major wind event across the southern Appalachians, especially on those ridge tops. Could easily see on Thursday evening those westerly winds through the gaps and at the ridge tops in the southern Appalachians, maybe even gusting over 100 miles an hour up there on the highest ridges of the Great Smoky Mountains. Maybe I'll head up there and intercept those as well. But by 9 p.m., the QLCS is marching rapidly into Alabama by this time, with a 70, even 80 knot low level jet starting to ramp up. It does try to spin some renegades off the convergence band that tries to set up over Mobile Bay into southern Alabama. But really, the short fuse models don't want to mature any renegades. They just want to have this consolidated squall line steamrolling off to the east. A lot of it has to do with the shape of the trough, not really maintaining that open wave and ski jump configuration as it digs into the mid-south. That would allow a more stout elevated mix layer to overspread the mid-south. You'd have a lot more westerly mid and upper level winds instead of more meridional winds that are relatively parallel to the squall line, with that front advancing pretty fast. It's just impossible for individual storms to move off the frontal boundary. But down here across southern Mississippi into southeastern Louisiana, after sunset, this is at about 9 to 10 p.m., these are going to be intense supercells moving through coastal Mississippi, coastal Alabama, squall line marching off to the east, very intense, impacting Birmingham, Tuscaloosa areas by 10 p.m., likely with embedded tornadoes within it, including down into southwestern Alabama. Strong low-level jet just ripping ahead of that line. I don't usually like to do this, but we'll look at the composite indices, the significant tornado parameter, 0 to 1 kilometer EHIs, just to show you where the greatest co-location of low-level wind shear and surface-based instability is during this event. And you can see this wedge of relatively decent surface-based instability. There does appear to be a bit of an elevated mix layer that tries to nose in on the southern mode, but still very favorable photographs, relatively shallow critical angles as well. It's like you are pulling in streamwise vorticity as well, just below the 1 kilometer layer, basically where it will make a 90-degree angle with the shear vector within the photograph, a culmination of which will increase to a greater area enclosed within the photograph curve and the storm motion vector to have extreme low-level wind shear. And there you can see that photograph. That's a dangerous photograph, kind of a classic Dixie Alley looking photograph. And if you had these upper level winds, mid and upper level winds a little bit further to the right, you'd probably force the storm motion even further to the right of that. But these shallow critical angles are not an issue in Dixie Alley because of the extreme wind shear. You got about 50 knots of bulk shear between the surface and 1 kilometer. And in a storm relative sense, the mid and upper level winds are still venting precipitation from the updraft and these mesocyclones, but you can see how close the mid and upper level winds are with the storm motion in a storm relative sense. You're not going to be evacuating a ton of precipitation from the updraft, but inflow, storm relative inflow in the lowest couple kilometers within that photograph. There's your wedge of surface-based instability nosing up toward the Vicksburg area. Vicksburg, Natchez included within that zone. So greatest surface-based instability for these storms noses up to the I-20 corridor by about 4 p.m., 3 p.m., 2 p.m. So it looks like you get a little bit of an erosion of the surface-based instability across southeastern Arkansas as the cloud cover from that advancing QLCS boundary overspreads that, helps to knock out some of the instability. But right along the I-20 corridor, northern Louisiana into southern Arkansas, just an extreme environment right there for tornadoes. And I'm going to have to get to that environment very soon. PDS tornado soundings all over the place. A little bit greater instability, some thicker cape as well out there by midday. So by the time this QLCS is marching into central Louisiana, into south central Arkansas, it's going to be moving into an environment that's characterized by extreme instability, extreme wind shear. We'll say modest instability, extreme wind shear. Alexandria, up through Ruston, east to Monroe, southeastern corner of Arkansas as well. So that's going to be a dangerous environment supportive of strong, damaging tornadoes as it moves off to the east. That's the environment that I'm going to be targeting. I'm in Jackson, about to head west on I-20 across northern Louisiana, and I'm just going to try to stay ahead of this line, chasing it all the way through Jackson, and then I'm going to drop south and work the southern mode, coastal Mississippi, maybe even southeastern Louisiana, southern Alabama, eventually into the Florida Panhandle. Now look at that, right at 18Z, right about midday is really when that environment ramps up across northern Louisiana. Seems to run into the Mississippi River, and the instability just doesn't want to advance. Kind of gets shunted down into the Gulf Coast region. You can see this surface-based instability starting to ooze on shore across coastal Mississippi and Alabama, however, by 6 p.m. Could set the stage for the development of these renegades. Maybe a confluence line that is being hinted at off Mobile Bay. Gotta watch the potential for renegade supercells as well. Late evening, closer to sunset, about 6, 7 p.m. Southern Alabama into southern Mississippi, and this advancing QLCS boundary. Instability gets shunted down into southeastern Louisiana, southern Mississippi. But then I'll be dropping down into this mode across the north central Gulf Coast to intercept potential tornadoes, renegades. Let's go back to radar again. I am going to be targeting this mode down into East Texas. That's going to be moving rapidly through northern Louisiana. No tornado warnings now, only severe thunderstorm warnings, yellow boxes, but these can spin up with little or no advance warning. In between radar scans, you can go from having a yellow box to a tornado warning, a damaging tornado in one scan. And you got to look for these notches right here. Little breaks within the line, little kinks as well. A lot of times they'll wrap up tornadoes just behind the lead gust front. So the gust front will march off to the east, and then just behind the gust front is where they'll end up wrapping up tornadoes. Almost like an occluding supercell. We'll start to wrap up tornadoes behind the advancing RFD gust front. And these are closing in on Mount Ida, quartz capital of the world out there. You got a severe thunderstorm warning, squall line marching off to the east, bringing with it 60-mile-per-hour winds, maybe a little bit of hail, but especially some strong damaging winds up in the Crystal Dig locations there near Mount Ida. Ouachita National Forest has that squall line marching through the area. And then down into the Arklatex, this is a mode that we will likely be intercepting, but I think that these storms are going to slide in across southern Arkansas. But look at this line developing all the way down south through the Texas piney woods. This could be pretty dangerous across southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana, so I'm going to be trying to chase this line as well. Might have to get my bird in the air ahead of this advancing squall line if there is the potential for any QLCS tornadoes, certainly. So stay tuned, subscribe, hit the notification buttons. I'm going to be heading out, live stream being activated, live storm chase mode being activated. Thank you, Facebook subscribers, for joining our community. Riding along in our passenger seat, doing in-depth forecast model discussions as well. But boy, watching these across East Texas, definitely some embedded circulations within these as they move into that very strong wind shear. Plenty of storm relative inflow right up to the gust front. Watching this one to the southwest of Linden as well. That could be a pretty dangerous storm due southwest of Linden. A little bit of storm relative inflow on that. But really, this forecast models are showing all of this to really blow up at about midday across northern Louisiana. This storm to the southeast of Jacksonville, Texas, near Gallatin, is also looking quite favorable for tornado potential during the long term. So I'm going to head west on I-20. Regional severe weather and tornado outbreak is about to begin across a moderate risk area. A large 15% hatch area, including the potential for strong tornadoes, even several strong tornadoes. Western Tennessee, entire state of Mississippi included, western Alabama, Birmingham, Tuscaloosa areas included in that. Might as well include New Orleans as well, in that moderate risk, but it looks like the convective line moving a lot slower down there. It doesn't really arrive in the New Orleans area until about 0Z, so about 7 p.m. That's when that happens. Here's the ticker, the lower third. Who are you if you don't have a ticker these days when you're doing a live weather report? But regional severe weather outbreak expected in and around the moderate risk area. Be sure to stay tuned to those watches and warnings. Certainly can't stress that enough anytime. I'm in Jackson, Mississippi, in the heart of the moderate risk area, about to head west on I-20. And I'm going to start intercepting that QLCS and then rip it east on I-20 and then drop south toward the nocturnal mode, tail end of that line, New Orleans up toward Mobile. Definitely included in the moderate risk area. So stay tuned to watches and warnings, everybody, today. Dangerous severe weather day is definitely ahead. You can see the moderate risk area dominating the entire state of Mississippi into western Alabama. We're going to be storm chasing, of course, streaming live. Be sure to hit the notification bell as I'm storm chasing during this big event. Wow. Monster QLCS. Last time we were chasing a pure QLCS like this event was up into eastern Nebraska into Iowa on December 15, that fast-moving line. I was with my good friend Mike Lashendro up there deploying gravity wave sensors. I'm going to be deploying gravity wave sensors once again. You may have seen that just to the west of the Crockett tornado, we measured a 6 millibar pressure fall inside of that tornado. I do want to look at the RAP analysis really quick as well. Just show you the magnitude of that immense low-level wind shear that's going to build across the Mid-South. So this is a good product. This is the meso analysis on the Storm Prediction Center website. And look at this wind shear. This is the wind shear that was along the immediate convective line that helped to spur those tornadoes near the Oklahoma-Arkansas border with this mode that's lifting up through the Ozark Mountain region near Ouachita National Forest. Definitely immense low-level wind shear available to that mode. And then look at this mode building up through East Texas. That's setting the stage for the storms that I will be intercepting. And look at that rapid ejection. That's 17Z. Holy cow. That's looking like you'd want to be in the Monroe area by about 19Z. So about 1 to 2 p.m. Monroe, southeastern Arkansas. Pretty dangerous severe weather evolving along the I-20 corridor. Monroe, southeastern Arkansas. Could even be embedded supercell storms within that environment. Look at that, southeastern Arkansas. Nasty line moving into strengthening wind shear, 4 to 500, 0 to 1 kilometer shear. Very strong wind shear ahead of this line. That is just a nasty configuration with that squall line approaching the Monroe area by about 19Z, so 1 or 2 p.m. And look at it ramp up between 17Z and 19Z. Absolute intensification. I'm going to be targeting that storm to the southwest of Ruston that's likely to cross I-20 in between Ruston, maybe near Monroe area, and then I'm going to be just having to blast off to the east. Track meet of a storm chase. That's going to be evolving here, but that is very strong wind shear, increasing, ballooning up ahead of the advancing squall line, approaching the Mississippi River by early afternoon, 1 to 2 p.m. So thank you, everybody, for joining me for this morning weather briefing, emergency weather briefing. I'm going to hit the road in the Dominator 4. It's not driving the greatest. It's making some weird noises, kind of a squeaking, clicking noise off to the left. Sounds like some belts. So I'm wondering if this might even be the last chase of the Dominator 4 before I have to get a rebuilt transmission. Next week looks incredibly active. April 4th and 5th. Looks like another outbreak across the Mid-South. More of an open wave, maintaining an open wave, more of a ski jump configuration as it moves from the southeastern Great Plains through the Mid-South. So, in fact, it looks like the entire month of April is going to be active. So, definitely feeling the year 2 La Nina, cold PDO, warm NPO blob across the north central Pacific, helping to encourage the amplification of these troughs across the western U.S., the negative P&A pattern, monster low-level jets, deep moisture just sitting over the Gulf of Mexico because of that anticyclone that's off the southeastern U.S. But right now is a good window for me to head west toward the Ruston area, just ahead of this advancing convective line. I've got the gravity wave sensors with me. I'll be deploying those. I am going to be storm chasing solo today. Captain Vanover had an accident actually yesterday morning. He is okay. He was out in Los Angeles, but returned back to DFW. He's going to be out with me, it sounds like, next week for that event. Big outbreak. Well, look at these down near the that's the I-20 corridor, the Arklatex. Longview, you have a special weather statement. These are definitely trying to start to rotate. Not surprising considering they're moving into an environment characterized by such strong wind shear, 4, 5, 600, 0 to 1 kilometer shear. And it does look like some rotation starting to organize near Longview. I don't think that's going to get going until well east of town. But also watching this area, severe thunderstorm warning north of Harleton, west of Jefferson, south of the Lake of the Pines. Some convergence as well, and then you can track that gust front all the way north. Mass severe thunderstorm warnings. Closing in on the Arklatex region. No tornado warnings in effect right now. When I started the live, we had one tornado warning in effect. As I was organizing the live, numerous tornado warnings in effect across western Arkansas. So thank you, everybody, for staying tuned to this emergency weather briefing. Regional severe weather outbreak expected today. Chase mode is going to be activated. Definitely stay tuned. Stay safe as well. Stay tuned to those severe weather watches and warnings in and around the moderate risk area. Never stop chasing.